The Knights of the Golden Circle. You were never supposed to know that name. They made sure of it. They burned their records. They changed their name. They buried their money. And then, they waited. This is the story of a secret society that was founded before the Civil War and may never have ended. 1854. The United States is fracturing. The question of slavery is tearing the country in half. Politicians are making compromises that please no one. And in Cincinnati, Ohio, a man named George Bickley decided that compromise was for the weak. Bickley wasn't a general. He wasn't a senator. He was, depending on which record you read, a doctor who wasn't a doctor. A man who fabricated his credentials and built a movement anyway. Because the thing about con men is that sometimes the con is real enough to matter. Bickley had a vision. Take a circle, 16 degrees wide. Center it on Havana, Cuba. Inside that circle, the American South, Mexico, Central America, the Caribbean islands. Bickley's plan was to absorb every inch of that territory and carve it into new slave states. Not preserve slavery, expand it. An empire of slavery stretching from Virginia to the Yucatan. He called it the Golden Circle. The Knights were not a dinner club. They were organized, ranked, oath-bound. 3 degrees of membership, each one deeper than the last. You didn't simply join the Knights of the Golden Circle. You were initiated. And what you swore on pain of death. By the time the war began, Bickley claimed 115,000 members. Historians believe he was lying, but the network was real. The castles, that's what they called their local chapters, were real. The cells in Texas were real, and the cells in Ohio were real. Here is where the story gets uncomfortable. The Knights of the Golden Circle did not stay in the South. Ohio, Indiana, Illinois, Missouri, Minnesota, Iowa, Union states. Men who lived above the Mason-Dixon line pledged allegiance below it. They encouraged soldiers to desert. They sabotaged enlistment drives. They resisted the draft from the inside. In the North, they aligned with a political faction called the Copperheads. Northern Democrats who called the war immoral, who called Lincoln a tyrant. Some of them were simply against the war, and some of them were something else entirely. Clement Vallandigham, United States Congressman, Ohio. The loudest anti-war voice in the Northern Congress. Also, the supreme commander of the Sons of Liberty, which was the Knights of the Golden Circle with a new name. A sitting United States Congressman leading a secret society that was working to destroy the country he was elected to serve. The audacity of it is almost difficult to believe. Almost. 1864. The war is dragging into its 4th year. Lincoln is running for re-election. The Union is exhausted, and the Sons of Liberty are making their move. The plan was called the Northwest Conspiracy. Arm thousands of Sons of Liberty members across the Midwest. Storm Camp Douglas in Chicago. Free 12,000 Confederate prisoners. Seize the state governments of Illinois, Indiana, and Ohio, and declare a Northwestern Confederacy. Union intelligence had infiltrated the network. The conspiracy collapsed before a single shot was fired. But it had been real enough. Real enough to plan. Real enough to fund. Real enough to nearly execute. A shadow government inside the Union had nearly worked. By this point, the Knights of the Golden Circle had already changed their name once. First, the Order of American Knights, then the Sons of Liberty. Same oath, same structure, same objective. New letterhead. This is what shadow organizations do when they get too visible. They don't dissolve. They rename, they rebuild, and they wait for people to stop looking. April 14th, 1865. Abraham Lincoln is shot at Ford's Theater. John Wilkes Booth pulls the trigger. The question that haunted investigators then and researchers now was whether Booth acted alone. Henry Burnett, the special judge who presided over the Lincoln assassination trial, believed the killing was part of a Knights of the Golden Circle conspiracy. He could not prove it. What he could document was a network of Confederate sympathizers in Washington, people in positions of access, people who knew and said nothing. The Sovereignty Bureau does not deal in conclusions it cannot support, but it does ask the questions no one else is asking, and this one remains open. The war ended, for most people. For some, it simply changed form. Jesse James,
Confederate guerrilla, member of Quantrill's Raiders, a man who rode with some of the most violent, irregular fighters of the Civil War. After Appomattox, Jesse James did not go home. He went to work. Trains, banks, army payrolls. Researchers have documented circumstantial evidence linking James and his gang to the Knights. Not conclusive, consistent. Because men like Jesse James weren't just outlaws. They were believers. And believers fund what they believe in. Here is where the story goes somewhere darker. The legend says the Knights didn't just steal, they buried. Millions of dollars in stolen gold, army payroll, Confederate treasury funds, hidden across the American Southwest. Not for themselves, for the cause. For the day the South would rise again. Treasure hunters have been looking for it for over 150 years. None have found it. But that may not be the most important part of the story. The most important part is that someone buried it. Someone believed the war wasn't over. Someone planned for a return. Here is what the historical record confirms. The Knights of the Golden Circle were real. The cells were real. The oaths were real. The Northwest Conspiracy was real. And the organization reinvented itself twice to survive detection. From the Knights of the Golden Circle to the Order of American Knights to the Sons of Liberty. 3 names, 1 network. What was the 4th name? We don't know, because we don't know when they stopped renaming, or if they ever did. What history does record is that many former KGC members flowed directly into the early Ku Klux Klan. Same regions, same ideology, same structure of secrecy, different name. A secret society founded in 1854 with a vision of an empire built on slavery, embedded in Northern politics, implicated in a presidential assassination, and possibly funded by gold that was never recovered. The Civil War ended. The Golden Circle has no confirmed end date. You were never supposed to know that name. Now you do. The Sovereignty Bureau. The archive is open.